And good afternoon, St. George and Southern Utah. This is Michael Harding.
And this is Christina Harding.
And we are here with On the Arts, that show that is dedicated to blowing the lid off of all of these artistic secrets that we have down here in not only St. George, but all of Southern Utah. And we've actually got a lot going on, it now being the holiday season particularly. Yeah. All sorts of concerts and things. Christina and I actually had the pleasure of listening to the Rebel Jazz Band last night at Dixie High School.
Yes, and it was free with a $5 donation if you chose to, which we did, obviously, donate some money. But it was beautiful. What a great and spectacular show that was last night. And these were just, I believe, just community musicians coming together. Gary Caldwell was there. From those who worked at Dixie State University know him very well. And Glenn Webb and Robbie Matheson and... who else am I missing?
Oh, my goodness. We had Rhonda Rhodes
yes.
was there, who played many, many different instruments very, very well.
Oh, yeah. How many did she play last night? About 3 or 4?
I remember 3 off the top of my head. And that we also had Dr. Tim Francis.
Yes. Oh, it was amazing. And who was the soloist? I cannot remember his name, but I know he was a former student of Dixie State University.
Let's just say that soloist was amazing.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get more representatives of the Rebel Band so we can get all the names.
Yes, they're going to be giving another concert. I believe the Jazz Festival is February 8th and 9th, and they will be performing at Snow Canyon. And then I believe at the Cox Auditorium, they have a special event there going on February 9th.
And so they actually have a guest artist who's going to be coming to perform with them. And this person, if you've watched television, these are the words of Dr. Glenn Webb, by the way, who was the leader of it. Oh, then you have to
talk in Glenn's voice if you're going to say it. Right?
I can't even presume to be that cool when it comes down to it.
They were pretty cool, yeah.
But I have to say, he says, if you've watched television or you've seen any movies recently, you have heard this gentleman play the saxophone. Is it a lady?
There's a lady.
Okay, this gentlewoman play.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how wonderful that we've got her coming for the Jazz Festival.
She's got her own band coming, and wow. It just, but I have to talk last night about our soloist last night with that jazz festival, that group. I just can't even find the words right now to describe this voice. He stood up there, and I thought, oh, this is going to be just a community, nice little event. You know, we're going to go support some local friends. I was blown away, and it was free.
It was a lot of fun. And keep your ears to the ground so you can find out about these events that are everywhere, especially over the holiday season.
And I found out through word of mouth and also on Facebook. Just kept, a lot of our friends are on Facebook and that are musicians, and that's how we found out about it. And I can't stress enough how wonderful this jazz band is. Yeah.
So anybody who says there isn't something to do any night in St. George, you might not be looking quite hard enough.
Yeah, some went to the David Archuleta concert. So
that little event.
That little event. It was a small little event, and I'm sure it went well.
And I have to tell you, I used to not believe call-in shows in the morning when, say, hey, be the 10th caller or something like that.
And what did you do?
I have to admit, yesterday, as I was doing my morning routine and such, there was on 98.9, I guess we can mention other stations here. For all 6 of our listeners, we do actually mention other stations occasionally. But the DJ actually said the 10th caller will win tickets to the David Archuleta concert. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. So, I took out my phone and I put in the number and I called. And amazingly enough, I got through. And the person who answered, and this was about a half a minute after he announced it. I figured there'd be no shot. And he just said, thank you for calling. You are caller number 3. And he hung up on me. And I thought, well, okay, maybe you can get through. So I waited a few seconds trying to be, all, strategic and calling just at the right time for the 10th call. And I called again. And I made it through again. And I had, thank you for calling. You are caller number 6. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. Yeah. So, I figured that was 3 calls. So I waited just a little bit longer. And I called, and I actually got through. And he said, thank you for calling. We have a winner. And I was like, oh, great. Okay, thank you very much. And hung up. But that was kind of an exciting minute and a half of my day
of your
yesterday.
Life, yeah. You were going to surprise me with tickets, weren't you?
Well, I either surprise you with tickets or sell them. I don't know.
Yeah, like that, yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard David Archuleta, actually. I have to admit, I'm one that I can't name the song. I've been under a rock.
Where have you been? American Idol? Come on, did you not watch those episodes?
I've heard of that show.
Oh, whatever.
Never watched, actually. Yeah. But anyhow, so please do keep your ear to the ground about events that are going on around St. George.
Oh, and support community members around here. Yeah,
absolutely.
Such talent.
And it's a pleasure for us to have on this show members of our community that
Yes.
participate, that have participated in fantastic
Who
things.
have amazing histories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings us close to announcing our guest for today. I always like to start out with a little bit of a monologue to set the tone. And I'm going to tell you about some performers that I never gave much thought to until a few years ago. And I never realized how integral they were to the performance that I was going to see. I went to a concert by a very well-known artist. Some may know him as William Joel. Others might know him as Billy Joel. But I went to his concert. I'd been to a few of them before. I had the pleasure of attending the first concert, the first tour that Billy Joel and Elton John did together, and it was just absolutely amazing. And I went back to see Billy Joel. He was coming through Salt Lake. I was working at Pioneer Theater Company at the time, and I thought, well, I really want to go see this amazing performer. And I went expecting, the performance that I'd seen before, Billy Joel, and it was amazing. But what really stood out to me was what happened for 20 minutes before the actual concert began. And these were those folks in black that, I didn't know their names. I'm assuming a lot of them were local. I assume some of them traveled with. But when we got there, we were sitting in our seats in the arena. And, they were kind of milling around out there. And then if you've ever been to where the Jazz actually plays their games, it's a pretty big place. And they had this ladder right at the edge of the stage that went all the way up to the very top of the arena.
Oh.
And the one guy came out, and he was in black, and, they'd been milling around, and he started climbing up.
Oh.
And you could hear the whole audience just like, oh, this is amazing. This is Cirque du Soleil right here. And, he crawled up, and it took him a good, minute to get up there. And so he gets up there, and everybody starts, talking again. Then another one comes out and starts crawling up the ladder, and we think, oh, my gosh, this is exciting. And it's about this time that it starts occurring to me, maybe they're setting up some energy here going on. This might just be choreographed. And so we had 3 or 4 that actually went up for that. And, you could watch them getting ready to work their lights up there, their spots and such.
Oh, wow.
And then the music changed. Billy Joel was playing very popular music, just for people to enter and such, other artists. And then the music changed to the theme from The Natural by Randy Newman. And with the change of the music, we knew something was going to happen. The whole audience could hear, oh, something's going to happen here. It's really changing. And the lights dimmed to half. Just half. And all of a sudden we saw even more of these folks in black come out, and they started milling around. There was the piano on stage. They were setting things and such, and they were wonderful. I'm going to be asking our guest, is this really a part of it? Because, boy, it was thrilling. And, they were out there getting things set up. And then the lights went totally dark. And you saw right behind the stage, they had these black curtains hung back there, and you saw them part, and the only way you saw them part is somebody had a flashlight shining on the floor, and you saw these legs, go right past, and of course everybody's like, that's Billy Joel, that's Billy Joel, and the energy just started building. But no, he walked past this console, and we saw, no, it was another gentleman in black, walking by. And this happened, I kid you not, 3 times, to the point where the audience was just this frenzy, waiting for him to come out. And then it went pitch black, and the music swelled, and I will never forget it. It was beautifully placed. A flash camera went off near the back of the arena, and for a split second, you could see that grand piano on stage, and someone was sitting there. And then you had another camera, the flash, it was Santa, and another flash, and when you realized it was Billy Joel. And this happened a few times, and that arena erupted. And I'll tell you, we were excited to see Billy Joel, but what an incredible performance by these folks in black. And that takes me to someone who has not only tremendous experience with this kind of thing, being a roadie and such, but also does not only a lot of work around here, but does some incredible lighting for dance, for theater, knows technical theater, works very, very heavily in contemporary technical
He wears black
stuff.
well.
Wears black very well.
Yeah.
Deward Wilson, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Deward.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Gotcha. Well, Deward, I mentioned the talent of these folks in black. I have to start with the question. Was that choreographed? Was that something that was planned?
I'm sure that it was. I don't know specifically the show that the tour you're referring to. I didn't see it, but Billy always had his crew play big parts in all of the shows that I worked with him. We were on stage for a few numbers where we were doing some choreographed events. We had a sound guy by the name of Anthony Galecchio, and so for Anthony's song, he came out delivering groceries to Billy, a bottle of red and a bottle of white, and started off the song there. And we performed on Good Night Saigon, and I don't know about other albums, but I know on that album, when that went platinum, he awarded all of us a platinum album for being on that
wow.
that recording, and so that was pretty special. That's still down in my office, but we had a number of choreographed things. The opening of the show, I was the assistant rigger on that. The opening of the show was actually the entire lighting rig flying out. It was suspended just 8 feet above the stage. It was the same sort of thing. We built up the audience. The lights would go out, and they'd come back on. And because it was supposed to be an industrial sort of thing, we had all sorts of steam. You had steam whistles going and the lunch whistle going. And finally, when we go into the number, we went to black. The rig started going up in the air, and then Billy appeared at the piano. Liberty DeVito swung around on a moving stage for the drums, and we're all standing around with ball peen hammers and pieces of steel and grinders and just all kinds of things, just making all kinds of noise and having all kinds of fun. So it was a good time.
I love with your stories that the folks in black are actually part of the performance with Billy Joel. It's you weren't just there to be a peon on the side. You were truly part of the show.
Oh yeah, we were expected to perform and like I say, I think back on it, I think we were in 6 different numbers, and we had to have a minimum of 5 of us on stage for each of those, either doing clapping, finger snapping, or singing the chorus, as in Goodnight Saigon, things like that. So it was we rehearsed it. We were in all of the pre-production stuff, and it was stuff that these were ideas that he had. Some of them were ideas that other guys in the crew had, and he liked it or he didn't. We played with it. We rehearsed a lot, and finally when we went out, it was nailed down to this is what we're going to do. These were lighting cues that came up on us, and sometimes we set the scene going into it, like I said, with Anthony Galecchio, with Tony, and other times we'd just be in a dark area, and the lights would come up on us, so we could snap our fingers, and the lights would go back out again. So it was a lot of fun.
What years were those?
That was the Nylon Curtain Tour, and that was 1981 and 82.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, a very long time ago.
Well, and what was this part of in your career? You certainly have done a lot more in your career than being a Billy Joel roadie. How did you get into this?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Well, specifically for that, I was working at a company called Oasis Stageworks at the time, and I had, let's see, I get the timeline mixed up sometimes. I had worked for Ballet West from 1974 to about 1980 or 79 or 80, and I was still working for Salt Lake County as the chief electrician at the Capitol Theater, the newly restored Capitol Theater, and I was working for Oasis Stageworks, and I was just a union stagehand, and I was doing a lot of rigging at the Salt Palace at the time, and that's actually where I first met the rigger the couple of years before for the Billy Joel concert. Billy used to actually mount his shows in Salt Lake City at Kingsbury Hall. And so I'd gotten to know a few of the guys off and on. Liberty DeVito would do drum classes and things, and they'd be in town for a while, so they'd hang out and run into them at Big Ed's if anybody ever hung out at Kingsbury Hall or Pioneer Memorial Theater, PMT, about Big Ed's.
Right.
I'd run into Billy Joel there occasionally, and that was just the way it was. So I'd gotten to know a few of the guys, and when they needed a rigger, Mark Hanna, who was the head rigger working for a company called Stage Rigging, Inc., and Rocky, who ran Stage Rigging, Inc., is one of those icons in the industry. And he gave me a call and asked me if I'd be interested in going out. I had just gotten off a gig with Ballet West, was working with Oasis Stageworks, so I went and helped them put the show in and learned the gig, and they offered me the contract, so I went out with them. So it's the way it was.
Well, you mentioned working with Ballet West. I've seen a good amount, as have a lot of people here in St. George, your dance lighting. And it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
How did you get into that? I'm taking you step by step back through your career.
Well, the way the whole career started was I was 13 years old, and my mother didn't want me to be home alone because I was 13 years old, what 13-year-old kids do. And my little sister was taking dance classes, and they were doing a production of Alice in Wonderland. And so, because I was the artsy type, and I'd been doing some drama and stuff in junior high school, whatever. And my mother had arranged for me to help do the sets, help paint the sets for this production of Alice in Wonderland. Mm-hmm. And it was at Bonneville Junior High School. And we go up and we get there early, and my mother is looking for everybody, can't find anybody. She leaves me on the stage and says, "Stay right here, I'll be right back." I don't know much about a stage or anything, but I'm standing there and I'm looking around, and it's, I'm fascinated. And a guy walks in, which I assume was the custodian. I don't even know who it was to this day. And he asked me what I was doing there, and I told him. And he said, "Okay, well, you stay right here no matter what you do." And he points to the back of the house, and there's a light on in a room back there upstairs. He says, "No matter what you do, don't go into that room."
Well, what an invitation is that?
For a 13-year-old, what are you going to do?
No.
So I go up, of course, into that room.
And, you stinker.
And I don't know if, if anybody's Star Trek fans, but have you ever seen a transporter and Scotty the Transformer where he's sliding those little sliders up and down? I walked into that room and I saw what to me it looked like a transporter, but it was an old Davis dimmer, and now I'm really dating myself because those are ancient. Those are auto transformer dimmers, resistance dimmers. And when you slide one slider up and you slide it up, it's like you don't move it a couple of inches, you move it a full foot. From zero to 10 moves a full foot. And I was pushing that up, expecting to see James Kirk materialize, but what I saw was a light going up on stage, and it corresponded to my sliding it up and down. And my thought was, they got to pay somebody to do this. And so that's what I decided I was going to do at 13 was do stage lighting.
And were you caught?
No, actually, I did it. Went back down on stage and helped with the production. So I just had a great time. It was wonderful.
I have no idea who that person was who came on and told you not to go in there, but I'm thinking idea. Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes, an angel came down.
And every time you move a slider,
an angel gets his wings.
It was pretty crazy. But that was the beginning of my career, and I started working at Pioneer Memorial Theater, actually, while I was still in high school. My drama teacher was a technical theater type. He had graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in technical theater, and so he taught us in high school. He taught us to do things right, the way things were done professionally. He had learned. He had studied under Vernadix, and he knew his stuff. And so in high school, good old Cypress High School in Magna, Utah, my teacher was Charlie Brown. And Charlie taught us how to build scenery, and he taught us how to, the Stanley McCandless theory of stage lighting and all that stuff. And my junior year in high school, myself and my friend Ray Smith, he set us up at the University of Utah to work the second half of each day up there as kind of apprentice stagehands. And basically, we built scenery at PMT, and then my senior year, we worked a little bit more because I had all my credits except one to graduate from high school. And I was kind of bored with high school, and the high school administration was a little more than bored with me. So
we'll just leave that where it is.
Yeah, they were real happy about that. And so in 1971 and 72, I worked at PMT, and in 73, when I graduated, I started working up there full time and going to school. And with that, I started working union calls. And one of my first union calls was Ballet West, the Nutcracker. Now, I'd seen the Nutcracker a dozen times growing up, but I was put on the fly floor, the pin rail, and this was a real hemp house. We're talking sandbags and the whole 9 yards. This is ancient stuff. And I'm up there actually on the pin rail, and it's 1974 probably. And I'm up on the pin rail stage right, and I see this snowflake. It's the end of Act 1, and the snowflakes come on. It's the big snow change. And I see this ballerina come on stage, and she's coming in from stage left. She looks off stage right, and I swear our eyes locked.
Oh.
That is now my wife, Linda Goodmanson.
Oh.
Excellent.
I tell the story when she's in the room, and she doesn't remember it at all. She was just, she was focusing off into
she
the
wasn't
distance
looking at
as she
you.
was supposed to. She couldn't see through the sidelights. So anyway, I went from there to Ballet West. Had an opening as an apprentice technician through the union. They offered it to me. I went to my college counselor at the time, and I said, well, what should I do? He said, well, why are you going to college? I said, to do lighting design and to be a theater technician. He said, well, this was 1974, so it's not the way it is now. He said, well, then I would suggest that that's what you do. You go work for them because, you're going to school to learn how to do this, and they're offering to teach you and pay you. Mm-hmm. So I did. And I worked for Ballet West from 1974 with a little break in there with repertory dance theater. But I worked for Ballet West until the 80s, and I did lighting design, production. I was the chief electrician, assistant electrician. I did props. I did all kinds of fun stuff there. And those connections moved me on through my career in dance with American Ballet Theater at the Met and City Ballet.
And we're talking the Met in New York, right?
Yeah, the Metropolitan Opera House.
Huh,
And
little place.
that's when I knew my career track was kind of, I hadn't quite planned it out real well. Because I was 26 years old, and I'm standing in the middle of the Metropolitan Opera House. I'm calling a focus at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I realized that I had pretty much achieved everything I'd set out to do in my career working at the Met. And so I had to think again about what I was going to do when I finished up at the Met. So,
Where to go from there?
yeah, where to go from there.
Oh, wow.
In the Met,
26.
that is quite an impressive space.
Yes.
I remember I went just for it was a dress rehearsal of an opera. I couldn't afford actual opera tickets when I was there, and I went to a rehearsal, and there was this guy conducting. As a matter of fact, his name rhymed with Schmamingo or something, Placido Domingo or something like that.
Yes,
yeah.
him.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was amazed. I was so excited to see him conduct when it comes down to it. But I was more impressed, and I have to tell you, this really shows you, I guess, how I think. I was much more impressed above and beyond the actual opera with what happened afterwards when they did the changeover to the opera that night. There was a crew. It had to be 100 people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is. Yeah.
And what really struck me is how choreographed they were, and not to entertain us, in the boxes watching this rehearsal, but they all knew exactly where to go, exactly what to do. I'll never forget they all had hammers, and they were changing the floor.
Yes.
And they came out and they all pulled out their hammers, and everybody all together, boom, just
they strike
hit the
as
stage.
one. Yeah, that's what they change. In fact, all the operas and the ballet also were performed on ground cloths back then. They were all canvas ground cloths, and the floor is the responsibility of the property crew. So you'll see 60 guys that are working props, and they'll come up, they'll unfold and unroll a ground cloth, and it may be checkered, it may be painted as marble or whatever it's supposed to be, and they all go to one side, and the department head says stretch. They all stretch together. He says set, and they all pull a tack out of their mouth. They have a tack hammer. They set it. And it's magnetic, so they attach it to the hammer. And he says strike, and they all strike as one. And then they move to the other side of the stage, pull it again, stretch, strike, and then they move and do the ends. And they do that change. There are some fascinating time-lapse photography of scene changes for the Metropolitan Opera that if you want to go on to YouTube or Google them or something, but they're really fascinating, and they're time-lapse scene changes. And those scene changes are scene changes from, and they happen either on, the main stage is just, it's 6 elevators that are also, you have the full stage upstage, which is a revolve, which can come down into place and set down into place. Stage left are 5 slip stages that can come on and be whatever you want them to be. And stage right are, I think it's 3 slip stages which fit the whole stage. They can be set for whatever scenes you want them to be, and they come out and set into place. And so the changeover from something like Swan Lake, we'd have Swan Lake stage left, and they'd have Tannhauser stage right, and then they'd have Billy Budd, they were rehearsing upstage, and it was just, the changeover crews were just, I would stick around sometimes after our shows and watch them change into the opera and stuff, just because it's completely choreographed, and everybody knows exactly what they're doing, and they're all led, the conductor of all that is the master carpenter. And, I thought it's like there are a few things that are universal in theater, like stage left is always stage left, stage right is always stage right. At least that's what I thought. I got to the Met, and my job was I was the OP electrician. And I honestly walked in, and when they told me I'm the OP electrician, I was scared to death because I didn't know what they were talking about. And it turns out that in old traditions, the prompt side of the stage was wherever the stage prompter was. And at the old Met, the old Met in the 1800s, the prompt side was stage right. Opposite prompt is stage left.
Oh, no.
So I'm
your
working.
brain.
Yeah, I'm working the opposite prompt, the OP. It's the only place I've ever run into that, and it's the Met, and it's just because it was historical and traditional. You were either working prompt or opposite prompt, P or OP. And it was, I've never run into that anyplace else. But that, stage left is stage left, and stage right is stage right, except at the Met.
Except at the
Wow.
Met.
That would,
Stress.
well, I'll tell you, it was doing tech that I learned, and this is related in a very small way, the whole righty-tighty, lefty-loosey thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as Christina, I hope, won't disagree too much, I'm a very handy guy. She's very stone-faced right now.
What do you want me to say at this moment?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
And if you do want to see our facial expressions, do check us out on Radio St. George on Facebook. That's Radio space ST space George. And we're also broadcasting live on YouTube right now. But the reason I say that is I am not handy by any means. Power tools are a wonderful thing to me, but I should probably stay away from them.
You use colorful words when you use a power tool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My use of language is
Yes,
wonderful.
your language skills come out. Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, it was when in college, where I went on the East Coast, William and Mary, and I learned how to hang lights. I learned how to focus lights. And, you wore the gloves. These lights get hot when it comes down to it. And what I loved about it was we were very Cirque du Soleil. Back then we were fearless. We'd be up in the catwalks, and you had to adjust a light. You probably could have just reached out and done it, but no, we had to hang from our left leg under the bar and get under the cheeseboro and turn
And you're
it.
hoping somebody cute looks up.
Exactly. And or sometimes not if you got yourself caught up there. And I remember thinking righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, because, of course, you have to tighten the instrument or loosen the instrument. And it blew my mind because it wasn't a stage left, stage right thing. I was like, okay, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, but from which angle? Is it when you're upside down? Is it when you're leaning to the left? Is it from the back? I have a lot of respect for people who can keep that straight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you want to have a whole lot of fun, hang upside down and tie a bowline above your head. That, to me, was just the hardest thing I ever had to do, and I had to do it a number of times, and it never ceased to just totally flummox me. So it's all those strange things.
Couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Well, that's right. I remember we had the Harlem Boys Choir came through in our space, and of course, we as students, we got to work the tech of what was going on. And I will never forget, you had, the Harlem Boys Choir and the director and such, and the sense of arrogant pride I had. I was up on what was called a cherry picker at the day, not even a genie like we have today. And I was up and I was trying to work one of the splay booms, which is, of course, the booms on the side of the theater where you can hang lights. And I was doing the thing where I'd hooked my leg and was leaning as far as I could to the left. And I heard one of them say, "Oh my gosh, he's death-defying." And I have to say, I was thinking, yes, thank you for noticing.
Man. I am so manly. Yes. Well, now, Dewar, you also worked with The Who.
Well, I did shows with, I ran a lot of follow spots and worked a lot of deck calls for the Stagehand Union, Local 99 up in Salt Lake. Proud of my affiliation with Local 99 and Local 1 in New York. But what happened up there was the membership was pretty much closed in the 70s. It was really hard to get work through the union because all the guys that were there, and there wasn't, the Local 99, the stuff they did, they had done forever. Well, what started happening was the rock bands started coming through, and the older guys didn't want to work these rughead shows. So they started letting some of us hippies work the shows.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so one of the first shows I got to work was The Who. And I got a load-in call, and then I got to run a follow spot, and I'm backstage before I have to go up to my spot with, it's Daltrey and Townsend, and they're just wandering around back there, just talking to everybody, and it's blowing my mind.
I bet.
Then I get up there at the follow spot, and they go into Tommy, and I was just a huge fan, and so of course I've got the headset on, and I'm running a follow spot and singing at the top of my lungs and thinking, man, they're paying me for this.
This is the
And
life.
I made a whole $25 for running the follow spot for The Who.
You go.
It was
do
worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh,
I would have
yeah.
done it. Are you kidding? I'll be
Heaven.
here for nothing. Are you kidding?
Yeah. I
It was
bet.
just absolutely awesome. And through that is, that's how I became a member of Local 99. It took me actually 2 votes to get in it, and all of my friends got in on 1 vote, and that was my arrogance showing up, and the older guys just saying, "Okay, well, because the third time you don't make it on your third time, you're blackballed. That's it." So they were kind of putting me in my place, and I deserved it. I still get put in my place occasionally.
Yeah, a little bit.
I remember
Every
I-
once in a
I
while,
need
yeah.
that. So.
Well,
Yeah, I've worked. I listen to. I hear people listening to the music that I grew up with in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and early 80s, and I worked all those bands. I worked Led Zeppelin, and I got to see Freddie Mercury on stage, and it's just I hear people talking about their favorite bands, and they start talking about bands like Led Zeppelin, and I'm like, how can you? Come on, that's as old as I am.
Yeah.
I was a teenager when I first worked Led Zeppelin and saw Led Zeppelin. So
oh, wow.
it was a renaissance of music for sure. It was things were changing in the world, and
Yeah.
it was fun to be a part of.
What a great time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I like they say, if you remember all of it, you weren't there for it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot the way it was. Went through my time with that. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine named Joe Meadows, actually. And if you're listening, Joe, if you are our 7th listener out there, he's actually working in Atlanta, Georgia right now as a rigger. As a matter of fact, he reminds me a lot of you. I have to tell you, I worked with him for 2 seasons. And for some reason, this really does relate. We were talking about the book Kitchen Confidential. That was written by Anthony Bourdain, who we actually lost recently. But he was talking about the culture of chefs and the culture of cooks in the kitchen, at even the finest restaurants. And he referred to it as a group of pirates. He referred to it as, wearing the ripped clothes and the bandanas and, speaking with, words that would make a sailor blush and things of this sort. And I remember we were talking about it. We were having a good old time. And he just said, yeah, they might be pirates, but they're nothing compared to the pirates that are backstage crew members.
That's right.
And riggers and such.
It's true. In fact, stagehands take a lot of pride in their pirate background and their pirate attitude. A lot of the terminology for stagecraft actually comes from nautical terminology. We still refer to the stage floor as the deck. You're working on the deck there, and rigging, of course, is the old hemp rigging that I grew up with, that I was trained on and apprenticed on. That was the same sort of rigging. You were rigging a sail. It's the same thing. You had to trim it the same way you trimmed a sail, and it was called that. And the old, that it's bad luck to whistle backstage. Do you know where that comes from?
No.
Well, you used to, all the ships, all the orders on the ship to trim sails and things of that nature came through the bosun's whistle. So 3 long whistles and a short one, you would do one thing, and 2 short and a long one, you'd do something else. But you whistle backstage, and something's going to move. Something's going to happen. So it could indeed be very bad luck.
Yeah.
Scenery could start flying in on you at any time back in the 1800s. And it's still, East Coast, West Coast, there was always that battle there. On the East Coast, people that work with lighting and electrical, they're electricians. On the West Coast, if you work with it, you're a gaffer.
Huh.
And that comes from the fact that movie lights, some of those things were 10,000 and 20,000 watt carbon arc lights. And to focus one, they were too darn hot, of course, to put your hands on it. So you had to use a gaff hook. And if you've ever been big, deep sea fishing, a gaff hook is a long pole with a hook on the end of it that you actually hook the large fish. You get them behind the gill and pull them up onto the deck. So these guys on the West Coast actually used gaff hooks to focus these lights, they became gaffers, and that's where it comes from.
Well, I'd love to shift just a little bit here. We've talked about your practical work where you've been the rigger and you've worked backstage as a stagehand and such. Let's get to the design side of things.
Design.
In order to introduce this, if you will, there were two reactions from folks in my past that have stuck with me, and I'm interested to get your reaction. First of all, was at William & Mary, they were doing some cuts of positions. There are always these financial concerns. Any high institution of higher ed in the country, always finance. And I remember in the theater department, they were looking at cutting a faculty member. And, they thought, well, who could we lose and still have our academic integrity and such? And I will never forget, I was sitting at the call board, which is where, that's the watering hole of all the theater folks. And this group of guys in suits was walking by, and I recognized one as one of the, many thousands of vice presidents of the institution. And I heard him say, literally, do we need a lighting designer? Can we have a student turn on the lights? And that was my first reaction to, oh my gosh, people don't quite get the amount of artistry that goes into this. Yeah. And then second, I designed lights for a show. That lighting was my secondary in undergrad. And my dad actually came to see a show. It was All the King's Men. And I was very proud of it. I had designed movement in these lights, and we didn't have the moving lights. It was, I designed, the fades and everything so that it would look like the light was moving and I could move the focus and such. And afterwards I said, hey, Dad, did you like the lighting? He was like, well, I didn't really notice anything. Sometimes I could see things and sometimes I couldn't. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's that whole statement of, if anybody sees the lights, you've done a poor job. Yeah. What is your reaction to that?
Well, that goes back to the subtleties of drama. Now, when you're doing musical comedy and things of that nature, the lights pretty much the lights set the scene, and you have movement of light that wouldn't be considered natural. But when you're doing a drama, basically you're dealing with natural light, and the movement, perhaps you're looking for a light source. So if it's a single set interior, you're looking at the way the light is coming into the room, and if it's coming through windows, or if you're pretending that there's a skylight or something like that. That's part of the design process. My work basically began, my design background comes from assisting Greg Geilman, who was the lighting designer for Ballet West at the time. And he had worked with Joe Melziner in New York, and Joe Melziner was the designer for Death of a Salesman and a number of other Tony Award-winning shows. And Greg Geilman and David Barber were my teachers in scenic and lighting design at the University of Utah. They went on to be the production manager and production stage manager for Ballet West. So when they began working there, they're the ones that brought me in as an apprentice. So I worked and assisted Greg in his lighting design, and then I became an assistant electrician and a lighting board operator. And I had some pretty good chops as a lighting board operator, because back then it was, you really were, if it were a 5-scene preset board, you had 5 small potentiometers in front of you that you had to be able to do a crossfade and a true cross and be subtle, or it was just different things than pressing a go button, you know. And these days we program things to happen the way we want them to visually happen within a certain time period and parameters by pressing that go button. And we use the derogatory term of go monkey for board operators these days, When 20 years ago, running a lighting board, you had to have a feel and a sense, and you had to be able to telegraph a look, and a lot of things that we used to talk about that we don't have to deal with that much anymore. When you program a lot of that stuff in. So unless you're busking a show, running it live, and just making it happen on the fly, everything is programmed into it, and all you're doing is pressing a go button, just a big square button that is go. And back when I was doing it, we were using, like I say, auto transformer boards and preset boards. And I started off as a presetter, and I would set up the presets in a 5-scene preset, and the lighting board operator would tell me when he was out of that cue, and I'd set another cue, and it goes on forever. I mean, I've ran so many different types of lighting boards that I look back at it now, and literally, I began my career when there were still piano boards, and these piano boards were these huge, they were the size of upright pianos, and they would have 6 to 12 big radial arms on them. And because they were resistance dimmers, when it was at 50%, it was holding back 50% of the electricity. Well, then electricity is just heat, and there's these big copper coils. Well, the guys running them would really just strip down to T-shirts and shorts, and they could keep their coffee pots hot on top of these things.
My.
They really did. And that's when I was 17, 18 years old. The last show that came through the Capitol Theater before they restored it was My Fair Lady. And that was one of the first load-ins I ever worked because they needed beef to haul this stuff off the trucks, and that's all I did was the load in for that. But then I got a chance to do the load out, so I got to watch the end of the show, and I watched these guys work, and it was amazing to me. But like I say, they put out a whole lot of heat, and since then, I was one of the first engineers and operators to work with computer boards. I worked with a lot of the manufacturers. Many of them aren't even in existence anymore, but when they were creating computer boards, and they had computer programmers working on these boards that knew nothing about stage lighting. In the early ones, you'd press a go button, and a 10-count cue, you'd actually see it step down in 10 seconds. So they brought in myself and a few other people to work with programmers, so they understood the concept of a true crossfade, an established cross, things like that they didn't understand that we tried to explain to them, and they finally got the programming down to where it was starting to work. And these days, if you go to any concert, back when I started, you hid all the lights. You had all the masking, and you didn't want to see that light source. Man, today you go to a concert, and there is nothing hidden. I mean, it's you're there to see all the eye candy and the flash and trash and all that stuff, all the whiz-bang stuff. In fact, the last concert that I attended, I really didn't know where to look. That's the thing that confused me. I thought, design has reached a point now where I don't know who is performing right now unless I look up at one of the huge screens that are flown over the stage. So they're doing the IMAG, the image magnification, to show you, okay, here's the lead guitarist playing this soloist, where what we would do is we'd drop it all down to just a blue stage and 2 follow spots on the lead guitarist, and that's who you watched. But now it's just, to me, it's just overwhelming. But, it's been quite a career for me watching some of this stuff, because when Moving Lights first came out, they came out with their own, Verilight would send out their own engineers, and nobody touched their equipment but their technicians, and if something went wrong, they took it back in a sealed room off stage that nobody was allowed to see when they'd go in and open it up and work on it. This was all priority stuff. And and that was a Pink Floyd concert was the first time I had ever seen a moving light. That was Dark Side of the Moon, as a matter of fact.
What year?
Pretty crazy. 1974, I want to say. 1974, I think it was.
But I have to say, I get a little worried sometimes. I mean, it's wonderful what we can do with the new technology and programming, and we have the moving lights and such. But I do worry that sometimes with the, as you put it, the go monkeys or things like that, that the artistry of lighting design might be hidden even more. Because you program it all in the big dark space.
Yep.
With everybody present eventually. But we had a student named Kat Morrill who was here. I believe studied extensively with you, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And I will never forget the giddiness. You always see actors on opening night. Their palms are sweating, and for some strange reason, they feel the need to warm up vocally only on opening night, never in rehearsals or anything like that.
Yeah.
But that kind of giddiness I saw with Kat because we were doing a project, and it was so exciting to watch her. She was actually, instead of setting all of her light cues, we had given the actors a lot of freedom and said, you just go where you need to go. We were working with them on impulse and such. And that made an opportunity for her to actually mix the lights live. She never knew what was going to happen. She had to know the plot. She had to know all of the instruments. And I was watching a kid in a candy store.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, wow.
That's called busking. And I've seen some. In fact, Joe Duran, my chief electrician down at the Cox, and he's become quite an LD, and he's a heck of a busker. I mean, he really is. And the way things are set up these days with touch screens, and you're basically working with what's called direct selects, and you're able to. You do some pre-programmed looks, you do some focus palettes and some beam palettes, and you're just able to set up this touch screen with all these pre-programmed looks and colors and everything else, and the way you blend those and the way you move through those in live concerts. And it's a talent, and it's a talent that I used to have with bump buttons and scene buttons and things that were much more manual. But in the newer stuff with the moving lights and the color and all of that, it's a whole different world. And things have not changed much from when you were in college and the suit walked through and said, can't we get a student to turn on the lights? People still literally look at it that way. No, all we need you to do is just turn on some lights and set up a microphone and maybe some projection. And I don't know, we might need some fog or something. And of course we need some slides projected. And it's like, but no big deal. Just do that. And it's like, okay, well, fine. No big deal.
No big deal.
We'll just do that.
We'll just make magic happen.
Which, honestly, that just it shows that we're doing our job. If we make it look
simple.
Easy,
make it look simple.
Make it look that easy, then that's
art.
what we've been trained we're supposed to do.
And you are currently the Director of Productions and Media at the Cox Auditorium, is that correct?
I am for Dixie State University, and I've held that position now. This is my 9th year. And I'm coming up on my 64th birthday.
No.
And I'm looking forward actually to probably some phased retirement in about 16 months. And I want to do that specifically so that I can get back out. And I'm doing administrative work now for the university.
Oh, okay.
It's mostly contracts and negotiations and the billing, and it's not anything I ever, set out to do. What I set out to do was to be a stage technician, a designer, and a teacher, and I want to get back to that. And hopefully, I'll finish up my time here, and then come back here, and hopefully do some more design work do more design work in the community.
Well, you do a lot of work in the community. You've worked at KDXI and St. George Musical Theater, and where else have you worked?
I started at St. George Musical Theater when I moved down here 14 years ago, not knowing exactly what I was
remember.
That's where we first
yes,
met.
We met there.
Yeah. My first show was the Mousetrap.
The Mousetrap, yes.
Yep. And so it's I've done a number of shows with a number of different people in town, different shows in different venues. I enjoy all of them, but more than anything else, I enjoy working. I enjoy that, and as a teacher, I'm sure you both see this. It's when that light goes on.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have a classroom or a group of 12 students that they have to be there, and 1 out of the 12 might be having a good time. And when you see that 1 out of the 12 actually come to you and say, "I love this. Can you show me more?" It's just there's nothing more rewarding to me than to be able to pass something like that.
Yeah,
on.
you're a great teacher.
So
I
enjoy it.
We've seen your work. Oh,
unfortunately, as is always the case with
run
the show,
out of time.
we're out of time.
Yeah. Oh, do you want me to go mention now about some events that are coming
And I don't
up?
think I even
Sure.
told one lie. So
Well, Deward,
got all these
congratulations.
tourist stories, and
Well, for those of you in town who are wondering what's coming up and where can you take your family to, we have Improv Dixie's December 22nd. They'll be performing at the Comfort Suite, and we've had Chewy Lockhart on here before. We went to their performance, enjoyed them.
Chewy is now my assistant,
And we
Yes.
love
Yeah.
Chewy.
And
yeah.
he mentioned you
Yes,
as well.
and he
Chewy.
adores you.
Yeah, Chewy is awesome.
And then we have the Office Lounge. Stand-up comedians will be performing at the Hilton Garden Inn on December 22nd also. We had one of their stand-up comedians, Chase, on here, and they're very funny. And then we have a Merry Movie Christmas with Adam Mast on December 15th at 3 p.m. We'll be showing some Christmas movies, and that I believe that's at the Main Street Cinema. And all these events are just $10. And not to mention that next Thursday, December 13th, Nancy Allred, who we've had on the show, will be performing a free performance at the Tabernacle. So we have some great events coming up. And Deward, are you lighting anything special recently?
I've got Nativity, a dance concert called the I can't remember the title right now, and Lisa Clemens will slap me because I can't remember the title. But that's coming up at the Eccles main stage this Saturday the 8th, I believe.
Oh,
it is.
yeah, the dance company. Oh, that'll be beautiful.
Yeah, it will be beautiful.
So those coming to see this will get to see your lighting there.
They will.
Yes.
They will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
And yes, and if I can say anything, it's turn off Netflix, get off your couch, and go to the
Yes.
theater.
Just
Please.
go out and enjoy. Yeah.
And who do we have coming on Thursday?
We have Sherlyn Davis. She's with the Arts Commission, and she'll be talking about St. George, and we're excited to interview and get to know her. She volunteers her time and raises a bunch of money for all of these little things that we get to go see around town. The art displays that are downtown are all because of her and her group, and we're excited to interview her, get to know her.
Well, it has been a tremendous, I don't know of another way to put it, but a tremendous season for On the Arts the last few months.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, Sherilyn will be our final episode, if you will, this in 2018.
Yeah.
But please know we are coming back in 2019
next semester, yeah.
after the first week of January. And we hope that you'll continue to listen. And please do take advantage of all of the opportunities to not only participate in, but to listen and such. And we also definitely want to thank our guest today,
Yes.
Deward
Thank
Wilson.
you, Deward.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And until you hear from us again, please remember to keep your focus on the arts.